Before we continue, understand this podcast is for adults only and refers to relationships and activities between adults which are voluntary and consensual. If you or anyone you know is being abused, coerced, or violently aggressed against, please reach out for help to the appropriate authorities. Hello and welcome. Gorean Voice, Episode 12, Service. Thanks for tuning in again. On this happy Sunday morning, I'm going to talk about service. There is, of course, a whole category of service, of the carnal sort, that need not be bounced into your eardrums to find its way to the back of your eyelids, so I'm happy to skip over anything vulgar this week. Let's instead talk about the infinitely more various and tremendously more interesting types of service that a lovely Kajira may render her master. Now, the spirit and flavor of service is rarely in the substance itself. My number one slave girl renders all manners of services unto me, from every conceivable domestic and culinary service to bearing, raising, and minding my children, housework, yard work, accounting work, and more intimate physical therapy, from a basic walk upon my back to straighten out my spine to a 90-minute massage. It's all in her job description. The real flavor, though, is attitude. Each service may be rendered with the side-eyed glare of a chain-smoking waitress with a limp in a greasy spoon diner, or may be given in a spirit of beautiful deference, love for her master, and as much grace as she may physically manage in that task. Of course, this is a standard many slave girls fall short of much of the time, but one service that a master renders unto her is to guide, remind, or punish, as the case may be, such that she keeps her eyes on the prize of graceful service. As such, I'd like to share with you the most beautiful sight in the world. Several months ago, I was in the company of a beautiful creature. She wore my steel about her throat, as I prefer beautiful creatures to do. She was dressed neither for a day at the races nor a night at the opera, but as always was put together in a casually elegant way. I was sitting at the table, or some seat or other, taking care of a forgettable bit of laptop business. She walked towards me, her eyes on mine, not languidly, something like a slow-motion catwalk. Her eyes were filled with the absolute spirit of love and service, as they alternated between looking up in my direction and minding the tea she was carrying. She was smiling gently with her whole face, but especially her eyes. Now, this was not some chick lumbering over to keep me hydrated. She was more a Vestal Virgin approaching some Hellenic shrine to add oil to the sacred torch. After tea, she would happily kneel and rub my feet, leave me in peace if I so commanded, or shrink by magic to fit into a pocket of mine for a catnap, awaiting my next order. The most beautiful sight in the world for me is a woman in my steel walking towards me, bringing me tea. Nothing beats it. That's what I like, and I especially like a girl who likes to give me what I like. Another flavor of service I'm particularly fond of is that of dance. My number one slave girl is an expert in a style of Japanese classical dance. In fact, at the yearly Japanese cultural festival in our city, she was always the star of the show, the main event. There is something quite wonderful about when all the cameras and eyeballs are on her, but her eyes are on me, and she dances for me. These days, her dance interests are more ballet-oriented, but she knows she is always dancing for me. Even when she's just doing a ballet workout or stretching session, she makes every effort to make it clear she is rendering service unto me, whether learning a new pleasing form, or just keeping my property, that is, her body, lithe and limber. To each his own, though. There is another Gorean fellow who has written and spoken at length about how he likes his girls to dance at gatherings. There is a certain totality of ownership on display when one exhibits his slave girl's abilities, and then may withdraw them at his whim to use them for more personal purposes. This Gorean master has also spoken about towel service from his girl. He has gone into great detail about the ritualistic aspects of this and other services he enjoys from his Kajira. There is a well-known polygamist patriarch who declares that he doesn't wash himself. He steps into the shower, and his wives take a hands-on approach to see to it that he steps out clean as can be. I used to make regular use of this very ritual in the PM part of each day, but now that we have kids, it's something we get around to every week or so, instead of every sundown. There are a variety of other rituals of service one can find in the Gore books, and all over the internet. I'm particularly fond of some of the rituals I've found on a website called Humbled Females, and I'll share a link in the description. Ritualized service, as described in the novels, is not only a beautiful thing to behold, nor does it merely keep a man's black wine and paga vessels full. That's coffee and beer for us earthlings. Such ritualized service also serves to reinforce the dynamic of master and slave. This aspect of Gore is especially useful here on Earth, where Gorean relationships between master and slave lack the normative recognition. In the novels, there are elaborate descriptions of the service itself, and I have read that people have taken this to the nth degree in online virtual roleplay contexts. A simple tea service can be described in such excruciating detail that far transcends the limits of practicality. It seems I would die of thirst before a cup touched my lips, if the walls of descriptive text are anything to go by. Some deer really do have teal fur. There are, of course, a great many formal servings and presentations of various food and beverages native to our genuine earthly cultures. One particular favorite of mine is the Japanese tea ceremony. In fact, I am personally so enamored of this ritual that I've altered my home's architecture to better accommodate it. While the serving of tea in my home is often a practical, put a cup in front of me affair, we do aim to conduct ourselves with grace in every aspect, from preparation, presentation, serving, consumption, and even the squaring away of used dishes. In my house, we have other ritualized elements of service, though many of these needed to be modified substantially after the birth of our children. My number one slave girl is to greet me at the door upon my return from work. She is also to handle my shoes, and give my feet a bit of a squeeze and a tiny kiss, and remain in prostration until she is dismissed. When I am working in my home office, she is to silently request admittance in a particular way, and to keep me well stocked with fresh tea. There is a service element to the order in which we eat. My slave girl sees to it that my plate is in front of me before she serves herself, and that I have taken my first bite before she does. Many of these take on a sort of secret service flavor when we're in a wider social context. At family gatherings and other social events, she spends quite a bit of her time seeing to these tasks. There are elements of service that go the other way, and I'm not merely referring to the fact that I'm the breadwinner of the family. For example, in all but the most hurried circumstances, I open every door for her, especially vehicle doors. Perhaps I'm particularly gentlemanly, or maybe I'm extra oppressive and make use of every door on this planet as an additional element of bondage, such that my woman is all the more my captive. My number one slave girl told me a cute little anecdote early on in our relationship. She had become quite accustomed to having the vehicle door open for her. This led to a few awkward pauses when she was traveling somewhere with her parents, and she would just sit in her seat for a few moments before she realized that her father was going about his business and not about to come round to her side of the car and open the door. In a more recent example, a lovely creature in my steel would take her place in the passenger seat of her own car, not in deference to my astonishingly smooth driving style, but because I like driving her, and she likes being driven by me. This self-same lovely lady will slave away in the kitchen for some hours to present me with the food of her ancestors and savor my savoring. Service certainly does go both ways, but it's important to remember that in our flavor of Gore on Earth, the man's service and the women's service are very different characters from each other. I hold nothing against women driving cars, and if I'm carrying some heavy thing or a sleeping child, I'm happy to have a woman of mine hold open the door for me. I generally, though, prefer to do the driving. I take it as an implicit compliment that a woman of mine sleeps while I drive, and unless I'm stricken with an illness, I can't imagine doing it the other way round. Gorean service, though, isn't just about separating blue jobs from pink jobs, though it does so explicitly. Gorean service is about rendering the everyday necessities of life in a beautiful manner, with a love that only a possessed, owned, and collared woman can know for her master. Nearly every time I leave my house, I am furnished with a thermos or other vessel of freshly brewed tea. The most important ingredient is not the water, nor is it the leaves or the matcha powder. The most important ingredient is love. As far as how I lead my Gorean household, I don't insist on an adherence to the elaborate rituals of service as described in the novels. I think that a strict adherence to the spirit of loving service and submission is much more important than any specific gesture. As such, the ritualized aspects of service in my household are bespoke to us. My tastes, her circumstances, that which I like to experience, and that which she performs best. This Protestant rather than Catholic, or works rather than faith approach to Gorean service is also useful in more public-facing facets of our lifestyle. Even in a gynocentric country like Canada, an elegantly attired woman serving her man food and drink in public doesn't attract negative attention. Also, as a matter of ministry, which I regard as part of my duties as a Gorean man on earth, it is far easier to engage with other people and couples, and possibly show them the word or the book, if my Kajira's public service is not so eccentric as to appear as a symptom of some alien subculture, but as merely a loving expression of connection. As connection is what many people are after, I think they're more likely to move in a Gorean direction if the connection is what is most visible. As such, a part of the way I serve my family, my homestone if you will, and any lovely creatures in my steel, is to bring about a little more connection, such that they may enjoy a wider social circle that is Gorean in character. We all serve, don't we? To the men, what sort of service do you like from your Kajira? In what ways do you serve her? In what ways do you serve your larger community? To the girls, what is your favorite service to render for your master? If you are as of yet uncollared, what sort of service skills or assets do you possess? Would that the man to collar you someday has taste that aligns with your flavor. Thanks for listening. In a future episode, I'll be going into the sadly vulgar topic of Kajira and body count. It's not a topic to be taken lightly, but I find much of the discussion on this topic a little too fleshly. I hope you'll find I discuss it with precisely the gravity it deserves. But please join me next week when I'll be going into the topic of motorcycling as an earthly analog to tarn riding. Yes, tarns, the iconic avian mounts of Gorean warriors. We're a little short of them here on Earth, but there are other means of soaring free. Lads, don't let up now. Climb over it, tunnel under it, or just smash right through it. Sometimes the only solution is dead reckoning. Lasses, keep it classy. Make it a point of his pride that his collared possession is such an elegant creature. See you in a week.